Appreciate. Focus on the why and not the what. Appreciating other generations keeps generations talking instead of fighting. That is a line from our text, Hayden Shaw's Sticking Point. This must have been one of the most enjoyable books that I've read for all of our courses thus far. It was extremely funny, first of all, and it gave a really clear, everyday, basic understanding for anyone into all of the issues surrounding the four generations that are working together at this moment in time, which he also states is a phenomenon because this is the first time in history that the traditionalists, the baby boomers, the Gen Xers, and the millennials are all working together simultaneously. And our text even says that then that may be the situation for at least 10 years. And the second point that I chose to deal with is appreciation. And one way that Hayden Shaw discussed that, or it gave us a deeper understanding of exactly what appreciation is all about, is through his ghost stories. He says that in his ghost stories, he uses these different stories because he says that every generation remembers what they were doing at a certain time in history that is meaningful to their lives. He said the traditionalist remembers World War II. The baby boomers probably remember, I would say from my own memory, I am a baby boomer. I remember the day, I was very, very young, but I remember the day Kennedy was assassinated and how it affected my family. I remember when Martin Luther King was assassinated and how that affected my family. The Gen Xers, he said, will remember maybe the significance of Donkey Kong in the 80s when that came out and how ingrained that was in our society, although I never played the game myself. And then we have the millennials. Millennials, basically, he says, were born with cell phones in their hands and with knowledge at their fingertips. So it's a totally different generation. And I believe what he's also trying to say is that if every one of these generations would appreciate what we all bring to the table, we would truly work in a much more harmonious manner. And there wouldn't be such an issue with the four generations working together and there being a constant conflict. As a matter of fact, in my research dealing with the generational problems, I was absolutely amazed to find out just how prolific this situation is. There was a study done with Eden Rowland, and it says that of corporations that have 500 or more employees, 58% of the management say they have a constant issue with conflicts between the generations. Now, I would say that the company that I did my research on, American Girl, was different because it was a much smaller store. So if I give you a little bit of the background about American Girl, American Girl is a wholly owned subsidiary of Mattel Toy Company, and the company was originally founded in 1984 by a woman named Pleasant Rowland. Mrs. Rowland was a school teacher, so she invented these 18-inch dolls to correlate with what she was teaching her students about in American history. So right now, these 18-inch dolls, which are basically a movement, I'm quite sure every mother who's watching or knows everything about American Girl. The dolls are $115, and as I said, our store, or the store that I would like to deal with, only has about, when we first opened in May of 2015, 80% of, I would say, 80% of the store were all female. Of that 80%, 10% were traditionalists, another 30% were Gen Xers, and the rest, I would say 60% were millennials. And maybe 3% of the store were males. And so our store was a little bit different as far as the conflict. But in doing my interviews with the employees, the biggest issue was the traditionalists who felt as though there's only four of them there right now, they felt as though the millennials did not respect them. they treated them as if they felt that they treated them as if they were their equals, and they did not appreciate what they brought to the table. As a matter of fact, they got the impression that the millennials were annoyed by them. When I interviewed the Gen Xer, the baby boomers felt as though the millennials were a bit lazy. They felt as if they expected everything to be handed to them. They felt as if the management were their parent, and they would complain and cry to them, which the baby boomers thought was totally unprofessional. And I remember overhearing a lot of "but why," from the millennials. The Gen Xers basically came in, did their work, out the door. They didn't focus too much on the going-ons of the store as far as the employees were concerned. And in our store, childhood attitudes are encouraged. So we had a different advantage. Most of the employees there, whether it be traditionalists, Gen Xers, baby boomers, millennials, there was a sense of childhood wonder that you had to embrace. So in the back of the house, there weren't too many issues with the conflict that I read about, and at that degree, it wasn't quite as challenging. But there definitely was some issues of the different generational groups feeling isolated to a degree, feeling disrespected, feeling unappreciated over across the board. That was the biggest issue that I did find. And basically feeling as if their positions, what they had to say, was not as important to some of the other generations. I thoroughly enjoyed and a lot from this class, and not only did I enjoy it, I learned a great deal with dealing with my mother, who's a traditionalist. I'm a baby boomer. I have 3 siblings who are millennials, who I thought in the past were absolutely aliens. So now I have a better understanding of why they do the things that they do. And then I also understood, in my personal finding and research, I believe that the millennials had, and I want the most to offer, because our research said that they will be the longest ones around of all the generations going forward. In other words, baby boomers, Gen Xers, and the rest of the traditionalists we will look to the millennials basically as our leaders one day. And so I believe of all the generations, that is a generation that has to be embraced and appreciated the most. From my own personal view, I believe that so much of the stress and the strife that goes on between the 4 generations would cease if, as my sticking point suggests, we learn to appreciate. And I know that may be hard for traditionalists or baby boomers to give up that edge, because they have gone through so many things that the millennials and the Gen Xers did not go through. And so they wear that badge and they feel as though it should be respected by all. But this is totally just a different generation. I discovered that in my research and my studies. This is totally a different generation. What we hold, when I say we, baby boomers hold dear, and what I think is so crucial to my job and being successful at my job, has never crossed some of the millennials' mind. They think it's obsolete, unnecessary. I am somewhat amazed at times when I'll see millennials come in for a job interview and how they dress. I would have never done that in my time when I first started to work. But I have to learn to appreciate that that is where they are, who they are, and it's okay. The traditionalists, I feel as though sometimes, as a baby boomer, they don't appreciate me or my generation because they think that feel as though we're entitled, and that's not at all the case. I've never gone through, well, I'll take that back. I'll never forget one of my professors saying that you've never gone through a war. I have. and was around the time of 9/11. And she feared for us because she said she remembers World War II. And until 9/11 happened and I saw the major change in the world, I couldn't really appreciate those stories that I heard about World War II or World War I or whatever, Vietnam War. I just could not relate. Until I had the experience of 9/11, coming from New York, living in New York, and seeing how our country changed, I could appreciate that. And I understand now when I talk with millennials and certain things don't bother them because they have not experienced that. So that's not their ghost story, so they won't understand and they don't appreciate. But there will come a time, I'm pretty sure, that they will understand and they will appreciate. The Gen Xers, in my opinion, were a totally different group of people to study. They almost seem to be in a whole nother realm. What they focus on and what they appreciate as far as the family life and wanting to work from home. I need the structure of going into a job, but they did not want that. And that was clearly evident in the research and the study that I did see. What I thought would be something to solve the whole problem, not only in my organization, American Girl, where we are comprised mostly of women and we need to begin to appreciate each other on so many other levels. I believe that fear is the root of so many misunderstandings or change. And to change, to address the issue of feeling not appreciated, is to have a round table. So much more. Have round tables where the four generations can get together, discuss the slightest little thing that they feel annoyed about. And I believe there'll be like a reckoning. Even in our book, Shaw says you can never understand or appreciate someone until you understand their ghost stories. And he gives this little illustration about how couples tell their ghost stories to each other forever, and then eventually you fall in love with someone based on not necessarily the ghost story. You fall in love with them because what they share with you and what you can relate to. And just the same way on the job, if we can understand and relate to each other's values and belief systems, I believe we can embrace that as a group of people. And we have to embrace that because there's not going to be a change. There'll never be a time when only Gen Xers work together and only millennials work together and only traditionalists or baby boomers work together. Those days are gone. We're all going to have to blend in, work together, and make the whole job experience a productive, rewarding experience for all involved. Once again, I don't know if I tell you my name. I'm Sandra Baxter, and I believe this has been one of my personal most rewarding classes on a personal, individual level of growth and understanding. Thank you so much.